In this Elden Ring Nightreign video, we're going to talk a little bit about the Deep of Night. We're going to talk a little bit about the fact that there are less than 30,000 players on Steam for the first time ever for Nightreign. And we're going to talk about where the DLC is. Where is the DLC that we were promised before the end of the year for Nightreign? We have obviously had the Everdark update and we had the Depth of Night added to the game, so there has been some DLC. But I think when we talk about DLC, we're talking about new characters, new maps, new bosses, maybe even new weapons or spells, something like that. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening with Nightreign and, where this DLC might be. Before I get into it, though, just apologies. I've been sick as hell for the last 3 weeks. So if you've seen not too many videos going out on the channel, you've been wondering why I sound a bit scuffed in the videos. I've had a nasty flu bug for literally about 3 weeks. So there's some nasty stuff going around out there, and I'm just kind of getting over the tail end of it right now. So it's kind of affected my production and some of the things I want to talk about. So I apologize for that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about a little bit is the Deep of Night. And the Deep of Night was an interesting update, in my opinion, because it added free content to the game and added a way for people to get more and more challenge out of the game. And it's hard to complain about free, you know what I mean? People will complain about it, and we're going to complain a little bit about it in this video, but it's hard to complain about free content. But I think there were a couple missteps with the Deep of Night update that, hasn't held the longevity that it could have held, and including with myself. I stopped playing the Deep of Night probably, I want to say about 3 weeks to a month after it came out, and there was just a point where I realized, why am I doing this? Every depth that you get deeper just gets harder, more health, more damage to the one-shot realms. And there really wasn't any sort of meaningful progression to it in terms of character progression. You can't use the Depth of Night relics outside the Deep of Night mode, which would have been some reason to keep doing it anyway, because, you could throttle even harder when you're not in it. And honestly, with the Deep of Night relics being added to the game, it already added more RNG to a game that's kind of an RNG nightmare in terms of the relics that you get. The relics you can get are just so randomized in this game that when you then add another set of relics that have to be specific colors, that also have negative effects, and maybe those negative effects aren't worth the positive effects, it made the RNG nightmare even worse. And because you could go out of the Deep of Night mode and play the regular mode again, and you'd absolutely throttle it after you've been playing Deep of Night because you've gotten better, you've gotten stronger, you've gotten better strategies. It's almost not even worth playing the regular modes of the game if you've been playing Deep of Night. So you basically kind of relegated to Deep of Night once you start playing it. And the other thing that the Deep of Night just didn't do that I feel like maybe they should have done some market research, maybe From Software should have done some on this sort of genre of game, because it feels like they just kind of came in with a blank canvas and went, we're going to do this and see if it works, is that there's nothing really to unlock that makes you feel like, even if you're not making character progression from the randomized RNG relics, it would be cool if there were more skins you could get, or I don't know, emotes, or something that made it feel like you were still earning rewards while you're playing the game. And I know that might sound a little bit like a battle pass, and that's a horrible word to a lot of people out there. But there has to be some sort of something that keeps you playing so that you can be like, look, I've run the Deep of Night 100 times, check out my cool skin that I got, so that I can show it off a bit, or something like that. Something where you feel like you've gotten a reward that was worth the effort. I feel like it's really, really missing that in this game, and it's kind of tragic because there are simply so many cool armor sets from Elden Ring and the Dark Souls series or Bloodborne that could be added to this game with very little effort to reward players for their time. And I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen that sort of thing added to the game. And I think, these things combined are why the player base on Steam has dropped below 30,000 for the first time ever. 30,000 is still a good amount of players, mind you. This is still a decent amount of people playing this game, and this is just on Steam. So obviously you have console as well, and I would imagine there are quite a few console players as well. But we are, in the decline of this game, and I think the DLC will bring a resurgence of players. But I think these combined factors are a lot of the reason why there are not as many people playing Nightreign at the moment, myself included. I love Nightreign. The combat in Nightreign is even better than Elden Ring, in my opinion. I really love some of the changes they made to the game. I would kill for an Elden Ring game that had characters with their own unique abilities and with run speed, the speed that it is inside and outside of combat, and the grappling hook on Wilder, and, you know, some cool recluse abilities on one character. I think that would be really, really amazing. So I really, really love Nightreign. But you would be hard-pressed to say after a certain point that, you know, it just becomes monotonous because there's a lack of content in this game. It was a $40 game compared to a $60 or $70 game. And I think if you would have gotten that $60 or $70 game, you would have had a lot more content, and I think I would have played this game a lot more, like, over the last several months. Like, I really, really like the general combat and the gameplay loop of it. It's just, at this point, there needs to be more, and that's where the DLC comes in, and I know a lot of people out there are just waiting for more content. Now, it was made very clear earlier on in this year when the game launched through developer interviews that there would be a DLC or a meaningful DLC before the end of the year. I don't think they were referring to the Everdark and the Deep of Night updates. So I think we're talking about like new characters, you know, new bosses, new weapons, something like this added to the game. Unfortunately, we're running out of time in the end of the year. Like, there hasn't been too many announcements from Software, Bandai Namco, about what is happening with this update. It's not like it's all doom and gloom. From Software has been known to just ninja drop things and, you know, do things on their own schedule. So there is still 2 months left in the year, and I definitely think, you know, that's plenty of time to see an update. So I know people out there that are going like, well, there's only 2 months left. We would probably hear something by now. There's definitely no DLC happening. I think that's just not the case. I think From Software definitely does things on their own time and their own terms. So I think it would be not shocking to see a DLC still before the end of the year. I think it would just, you know, probably be cutting it a little bit closer than people would appreciate. I think some people out there, myself included, would appreciate like a heads up, like a tweet or a, you know, any sort of announcement that the DLC is coming. They don't even have to say like what's in it, but just as long as we know something's coming, I think that would be cool. We do have the Game Awards at the end of the year, not too far away, that, you know, they couldn't Ninja announce the DLC at the Game Awards. It's been done before. Other games have done it before where they're just like, hey, DLC available now. So I think it's very likely that we'll just see a Ninja drop either at the Game Awards or, you know, sometime later this year where on a random Tuesday, they're just like, hey, the DLC's out now, go check it out or whatever. So I'm still in the camp that I think the DLC is happening this year. I don't think From Software is a company that likes to go back on its word. So I'm still optimistic about it, but I can definitely see where people are getting a little bit concerned. Now, in terms of what the DLC could contain, whether it comes out this year or next year or whenever it comes out, I'm really hoping for at least 2 new heroes or 2 new Nightfarers. I think the Nightfarer part is the most interesting aspect of Nightreign. To me, this is my personal wish list. I think it's unlikely that we're going to get 2, but if we got at least 1, I think 1 is absolutely a necessity to show that From Software is actually working on like adding new content to this game, and it's not just going to recycle like old bosses, old weapons, old spells, you know, over and over and over again, that it's going to create new stuff as well. And in that vein, I would love to see like at least 1 new Night Lord as well, maybe 2 new Night Lords that have their own moves and their own boss fights. It would be great if they could add more bosses to the rotation as well, like from previous games. But I think having the new content is really what I'm looking for. Something that's new, that they had to go out and create, that they couldn't just like ship over from a previous title. That's what I'm really, really looking forward to in this DLC. That said, though, one thing that I think could really, really enhance the gameplay of this, besides adding like a whole new map, I really, really feel like Nightreign needs a new map. Like, it's so, you know where everything is at this point. Like, you can pretty much, if you've played as much as I have, or even half as much, you can probably map out your run the second you see the map, or, you know, within the first 10 seconds of seeing the map, you can pretty much map it out and remember like, oh, this is what's here, that's what's there. You can almost remember exactly which bosses you'll face and all that stuff. So there's some randomization that needs to take place with a new map at some point. I don't know if it's going to come in the first DLC, but it definitely needs to come at some point. Even if it's like a paid DLC later on, I absolutely think that needs to happen. But the thing that I think this game could also really, really benefit from that would be reusing old stuff is just weapons. There are so many weapons that could be added to this game from previous games and also from Shadow of the Erdtree. Shadow of the Erdtree, none of the Shadow of the Erdtree weapons have made it in. None of the Shadow of the Erdtree spells have made it in. Just adding like that grip of weapons and spells to the game would mix things up tremendously and it shouldn't be as much effort as creating brand new content. Now, obviously, if you're just creating like one hero and a couple of bosses, it's not a ton of content to create. But if you have like the existing code from Elden Ring for all these weapons and their movesets and all that, and you're moving it over to Nightreign, I gotta imagine that isn't too difficult to do in the grand scheme of coding and all that stuff as well. So the too long didn't read version of it is, I'm hoping they have at least 1 or 2 new heroes. I want to see 1 or 2 new Night Lords. I want to see some old bosses mixed into the boss pool to mix it up and maybe change and mix up the rotation. I want to see Shadow of the Erd Tree or some of the weapons from like the Souls games added to the game. And at some point, I absolutely want to see a new map. We need a new map. We need like another way to play this game on a, you know, to make it new and fresh again. And I think a new map is probably the simplest way to do that, even though it's by far the most work out of all of those things. So what do you guys make of that? Are you guys still hopeful that the DLC for Nightreign is coming? Are you still playing Nightreign, or are you kind of on a hiatus until more content comes out like me? What do you make of it so far? What do you make of the player count dropping below 30,000? Let me know in the comments below.